Lisa, I'm so excited about this. I get to interview you for once.
I know it seems like, I don't know, role reversal here, huh?
Ooh, I am super excited to talk about some of the lessons I've learned from you, some famous Lisa isms, and ask you some questions that I know will bring massive value to people listening.
Well, as someone who's been your advisor for a number of years, I think this is going to be a really great conversation for our listeners. So thank you for saying yes to hosting this week.
No pressure. It's not like you're kind of a big deal or anything.
I'm not.
So, to prepare for this, I was going through my notebooks because I like to have a new notebook every time that we have a strategy day together. And the pile's getting kind of big, quite a lot of genius that you've shared with me over these years.
And quite a few cities too.
Yeah, well, what are we at? Like seven different cities or something now over these 5 years? It's
I
very
know. I think it's awesome that you and your husband and Bill always choose to fly in for your strategy sessions. And it doesn't matter where I am, you will come and meet me there to do a session. In fact, you're all the more keen if it's someplace new.
It's true. There's magic in doing something in person. Like online is great. We'll get value either way. But when you're together, there's something different about the energy and the room and the ideas, and it's uncomparable.
I agree. I agree.
So first thing I want to ask you about is many, many, many years ago now, in our very first interaction, you gave me, in our first coaching session, I should say, you gave me a lovely compliment about how smart I was. And I immediately tried to backtrack and shut you down and say, oh, well, yeah, but, and you looked me dead in the eyes and you said, do you think I'm lying to you? And I froze, not really sure what the right or wrong answer was in that moment. And you said to me, to try and dismiss someone's compliment is, in fact, an insult. You're saying that you don't believe them. Where did you get that idea and that mentality from? Because a lot of people, I see it day in and day out, they don't absorb compliments, but you teach us to do that. Where does that come from?
I don't know. Uh, I probably experienced it at some point in my life where somebody gave me feedback that, or gave me a compliment that I tried to shirk off as, not being true. And they probably held me to it. And it was probably a defining moment for me. And I don't remember who it was, though. I don't remember where it came from, but I do know that, sometimes I feel like as a leader, it is our responsibility to pour into people and to help people see their greatness. And a lot of times people don't realize what they're great at. And when you give somebody a compliment and they dismiss the compliment, or they don't receive the compliment, they don't hear it, they don't absorb it, then they don't they don't get the benefit of it. And so it's just important for me. I think if I take it a step further, one of the things that I learned when I worked for TELUS was how to give feedback. And one of the steps of giving appropriate feedback was to actually invite a response. And so when you gave feedback, you wanted feedback to be skill specific. You wanted to give a specific example, and then you wanted to talk about the value or the benefit of the whatever the behavior was. And then you wanted to ask somebody how they did that, and or how that makes them feel, or where they learned that. And the reason that you asked that question is because it allowed somebody to kind of steep in the feedback and have to embody it. And so I think part of that is also what made me want to hold people in that space to hearing their greatness. Because, we all are so hard on ourselves that when there's an opportunity to steep in our greatness, we should take it.
Oh, I love that. And I'm definitely going to use that tactic of asking them where they learned that from or how it makes them feel. I think that's a great way to get people to actually reflect on the feedback you're giving them, the compliment. Because I'm sure you can't give everyone that stare down you gave me. It probably doesn't work for everybody.
You might be surprised.
So, on that note, actually, But something I think is really interesting about you is how I see you interact with me and my husband, even just as the two of us, and the type of feedback, directness, wording that you'll use with us. And I've seen you do it with others too. It's very tailored to the individual. How do you do that? How do you know what somebody needs so well?
I think part of it is just intuition, part of it is the relationship, and part of it is also lessons in leadership. So, another lesson that I learned, I probably earned it too, many, many years ago, is that some people need to be stroked with a feather, and other people need to be hit with a brick. And so that metaphor really kind of stuck with me, meaning that some people needed to be really directed in their face, and other people needed to be a little bit of a gentle nod. And you have to get to know people's personalities to know how they are going to respond. And I think the better the relationship you have with people, the more you're able to judge and gauge how somebody is going to respond to things. And sometimes, though, you can give somebody feedback and not be so direct, be more like a feather approach. And you have to all of a sudden insert a brick because it's just not working. And so I think it's just life experience and seeing what works. And I think that because I work with some of my clients for a really long time, I get to know their personalities really well. And I feel like I just kind of know what they can handle, and I know the right approach to make them move on something, if that makes sense.
Oh, it sure
Like
does.
I can't, pussyfoot around something with you. It's not going to work that way. I have to be direct and to the point with you. I have to challenge you. If I challenge you, then you're going to do anything. If I make it like, yeah, I bet you can't do this, you're going to do it. Like, I know that you're competitive. And so I know that if there's a challenge in there, even if it's just a slight little dig, oh, I bet you can't do that, you're going to go prove to me that you can.
It's true. And even if I know that's being done to me, it doesn't change the fact. Like, let's go.
Yeah.
That's awesome. What type of characteristics do you like the most in people when you're coaching them? Whether it's personality or worth ethic, like very open ended. What makes
Oh.
someone enjoyable to work with as you being the coach?
I enjoy working with people who are honest and vulnerable about where their blocks or their challenges are. When people tell me what's really going on, when they can be honest about those things, it's easier to help them. I enjoy working with people who take action. So if we're talking about something and we talk about what you need to do to make it happen, and we talk about the same thing over and over and over again, I kind of feel like you're wasting your money in working with me, because if we're just going to talk about the same problem and the same solution that you haven't tried 500 times, then there's something else going on there. And so I enjoy working with people that are confident enough to try things. And I enjoy working with people who have a sense of gratitude and generosity about them as well, because I try really hard to bring generosity into my work as much as I can with people. And I have a deep sense of gratitude for the work that I get to do and the people that I get to do it with. And it's really nice when you work with people that are like-minded in that way.
I love that. You definitely are someone who's very generous, and with your time, gifts, praise, it's something I really appreciate about you. And you're also someone who's very high integrity. And I've seen that many times over the years of us working together. But the one that stands out the most for me is when my husband, Nabil, and I came up to you at an in-person event and we said, Lisa, we're ready. We want to work with you privately. And you said, no. Oh, what do you mean no? Like, we want to give you money. No, you're not ready yet. And you wouldn't let us invest because at that moment you said it was too much. Even though the cash was available, it would have hamstrung the business as a whole too much. And it shocked us. You were right. You offered us an alternative. Let's do a strategy. I think probably a half day that first one would have been together. and gave us tactics so we could grow. So within 6 months, we were ready. But I will never forget that. Anyone who has gotten a quote from you knows what type of investment level that was. And you said no to the sale.
Mm-hmm.
Tell me more about that.
I think money can create a lot of stress and anxiety for people. And I sat in a room one day where a coach was pitching their coaching program, and they told the audience not to make them the bank. That if they wanted to do the 25, 50, or $100,000 coaching program, that they should go to their own bank and take out a loan so that it and pay in full so that it didn't get in the way of their coaching relationship. And that made me feel a little bit sick to my stomach, because I thought, wow, you're actually advising people who don't have money to go get a bank loan to work with you. And I think that I'm all for investing, and I think the investment should stretch you, because if it's not enough of a stretch, then you're not going to do the work. But I never want people to spend their, and I'm not trying to say this was your last penny, because I know it wasn't, but I want people to invest at the right level, at the right time. And I'm not in it just for the money. While I care about money and I care about numbers, and I'm a little bit OCD about sales and profit and all that stuff in my business, I don't want to just take money for the sake of taking money. I want to take money at the right time, from the right people, for the right reasons, where I feel like I can have a positive impact. And, there's another argument that maybe I should have taken your money that day. Maybe I should have said, okay, let's do it. And maybe you would have grown faster. Maybe that investment 6 months earlier would have helped you to grow. But if my memory serves me correct, your husband had just recently started working with you in the business. He had just left his job. I have this big piece of sun on my face if you're watching the video. And I wanted to make sure that you guys were okay financially with him coming into the business before you made that type of big investment.
Yeah. I mean, it worked beautifully. Here we all are several years later, all the better. But yeah, it was something very impressive to me that
Thank you.
did that. And one of the other core values that I've seen in you time and time and time and time again is that you do what you say you are going to do. Lisa Larter, that's an uncommon characteristic. It's something that I admire greatly. I try to embody as well, but very few people are like that. Where does that come from?
Well, I don't know. Insecurity? No, maybe. One of my top strengths in the Strength Finders is one of my top 5 is responsibility. And there's good and bad in that, because it means that I will do what I say I will do, even if it kills me. And so there is such a thing as being overly responsible. And I think that there are times when I'm overly responsible. One of the values that I have always lived by in business, even when I had a job, is do what you say you will do it when you say you will do it. And if you can't do it when you say you're going to do it, then tell somebody in advance and tell them when you will do it instead, and then do that. And so to me, it's your word is your reputation. And if you have a bad reputation, then people can't trust you. They can't count on you. And so I just think it's really, really important for people to be able to rely on you to do what you say you will do. And so I try really, really hard. I'm not perfect, but I try really, really hard to always do what I say I'm going to do. There are some days I get to the end of the day, like, you and I are recording this, and this is my 8th call today. And so there are still some things on my to-do list that I need to do. And, it's almost 5 o'clock somewhere, and I would much rather go pour myself a glass of wine. But there are things that I need to do because I said I would do them that need to be done first.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a key ingredient in building a long-term successful business.
Yes. You have to balance that, though, you have to balance doing what you say you will do with the right sense of urgency. Because when you overpromise and you have to burn the candle at both ends to deliver, then you need to rethink the timelines for which you say you will deliver things. I think sometimes overachievers, people who have high responsibility like I do, we can make everything a priority that isn't a priority. And so you have to learn what the real priorities are and deliver on the top priorities, but don't make everything a priority because everything isn't.
Yeah, that's certainly one of the things that I struggled with. And you told me many times, and it's a Lisa-ism stuck in my head of you don't have to kill a fly with a sledgehammer. Like, not everything is top priority, not everything is 10 out of 10. And it's so true, but it's a habit that takes a long time to break and a lot of practice to figure out what the actual priorities are. And certainly not a learn it overnight thing.
Yeah. And I think sometimes we think that people have unrealistic expectations of us. I think that we think that, oh my gosh, if I don't get this thing done today, the client is going to hate me. Whereas if you actually reached out to the client and said, I had a bunch of calls that went late today. I know I owe you this deliverable. It's going to be later than I anticipated. I'll have it in your inbox by 8 o'clock tomorrow. They would be okay with that. But so many people are conflict avoidant today that they're afraid to say anything. So they say nothing and then they just don't deliver. And then they think that nobody's going to notice that they didn't deliver. And then they procrastinate and they stall even longer to the point where the client's now following up with them. And now something that wouldn't have been a big deal if they just dealt with it at the beginning becomes this big thing that somebody's upset about.
Yeah, it's a self-sabotaging behavior when you get into that pattern, right? Once you don't deliver once, you're then afraid to send anything because what if they're mad? Which means the more you delay, the more likely they are to be mad, and rightfully so.
Right.
Where do you think that comes from overall, that type of behavior where letting fear control decisions and behaviors?
What do you mean? The fear of following through, the fear of not following through, the fear of conversation? Like what, give me more
any of it,
context.
right? I feel like a lot of what you've taught me over these years is to be more brave and to do things that are scary. And almost every single time, what's on the other side of it, it was not even remotely as bad as what I'd imagined, right? There's this saying that I love, which is we suffer more in imagination than reality, always. So I know a lot of my old bad habits were about fear, fear of what people would think or say or do, or what if I couldn't really do everything I thought I could? It was all about fear for me.
I think
that people. So I'm curious what you think. When people are self-sabotaging in ways, where does it typically come from?
Well, I think there's different things there. So one, I think that people are often afraid of what other people think, or they are afraid that other people will think that what they're doing isn't good enough. And that gets in the way. I think that people self-sabotage. I don't know that people intentionally self-sabotage. I think that people get distracted and they're disorganized and they don't know how to prioritize. And so they end up not following through on things because they're not organized and they don't have the self-discipline to do what they say they're going to do. I don't know that they're intentionally self-sabotaging. I think they just can't get their crap together. And that often comes from being distracted, too much time on the phone, too much time scrolling social media, too much time being distracted by everybody else's priorities, and not enough time, not enough space to actually sit and think. So, I know I've talked to you about this. Next year, my coaching calls are changing. They're not going to be 60 minutes anymore. They're going to be 50 minutes. And they're going to start on the hour and they're going to end at the 50-minute mark so that I have 10 minutes between calls. Because right now my calendar is crazy. And I have some calls that start at like 5 minutes after the hour and 40 minutes after the hour. And I have like 5 minutes in between. But if a call runs over by like 3 minutes, then I got to get into Zoom. But for the next call, I don't even have time to pee, let alone get a new bottle of water. And so I've decided I need more space because I need a couple of minutes to ground myself before I get into the next call. I need a minute to go look at, oh, okay, what did we talk about last time, and get myself in the right space. And so that means I need to better organize myself to show up, to deliver better in the 50 minutes versus the 60 minutes. And I think that that is an example of a practice where stepping back and assessing and looking at what you're doing and how your behaviors are not helping you is something that people need to spend more time doing. But we're also busy, and we're also busy doing this on our phones, that we're not actually taking the time to really think.
So how do you create a container to allow for that time to think rather than going for the phone and, numbing yourself at the end of the day?
I think that it comes down to a few things. It comes down to self-awareness. It comes down to regular practices of getting out from behind the computer and your phone. It comes from doing in-person strategy days where your phone isn't on the table with you and all of a sudden you're not plugged into your computer and you have time to think. It comes from quiet time in the morning when you go for a walk or you sit and journal or you read and you have that time to think. It comes from being intentional about those things. It's interesting. I did a keynote yesterday, and I had been working on this keynote, and I was doing a keynote for the Better Bridal group, and I wanted to use the Barbie trailer as a video to start off my keynote, because I wanted to kind of talk about some of the stuff from the Barbie trailer, because I thought it would be fun and interesting for the group. But I was really struggling with, like, how am I going to pull this together in my introduction? And I've been thinking about it and thinking about it and thinking about it. But then I would find myself, distracted on my computer and not really like thinking about it, but not actually doing anything with it. And so yesterday morning, I went to bed. I went to bed the night before, and when I crawled into bed and I wasn't on my phone and I was just thinking, all of a sudden the ideas started coming to me as to how I could pull this together, because I had conceptually thought about it, but I hadn't quite. It's like, yeah, I was trying to mold something that hadn't quite come into shape for me yet. And so these ideas started to come to me, and I was like, okay, that's good. I kind of have some ideas now. And then I got up the next morning at 5 a.m. because I knew I needed to practice. I needed to practice my introduction. And the first thing I found myself doing was looking on my phone, and I was like, okay, Lisa, stop it. If you get into Facebook and Instagram and all this stuff right now, you're going to totally lose your ability to focus and practice and do this well. So I had to catch myself and put my phone down. And next to me singing on stage a cappella, I think it was probably one of the best opening keynotes that I've ever done, because I practiced it, practiced it, practiced it. But I had to put my phone in another room and charge it so that I wasn't on it. Because as soon as you get into that zone of scrolling and consuming everybody else's stuff, it's like your brain just stops working the right way. So I think we just all have to be more mindful of how much time we waste on social media, and how important it is to take those pauses to really think about and practice the behaviors that we want to have in our life.
Yeah, it's hard, right? Like when these devices and these programs are created with the intention of pulling us in, like the illusion of self-control and self-discipline and motivation, in the sense that you have the power and you alone, and whether or not you want to put in the effort, it's a lot harder than it was in the past because everything is programmed to draw us in. So one of the things I loved from a recent book in Thought Readers was it talked about how if you want to stop or slow down a behavior, you have to create a counter behavior. So for me, every time my eye catches something on that screen, even when it's over there right now, if I want to touch it, I have to do 5 push-ups. Do you know what I have not done? Is any push-ups, because it's never been worth it. The only thing that, like, I hate it. And that's why I intentionally chose it, is because I know the actual effort required to do that, when all it is my brain just getting attracted by the light. I don't actually want to touch it, nor need to touch it during the workday, especially when I'm doing focus work.
So turn it over.
So I've done that one lots of times before, but for me, I feel more powerful when it's an intentional choice. I feel like I'm building strength around the decision rather than, oh, I didn't eat salt and vinegar chips because there were none in my house. That's where I'm at with salt and vinegar chips. They can't be in the house or I will eat them. Versus actually having the control that even if they were here, I wouldn't eat them. And that's how I feel about it with the phone as well, is that if I'm like, I want to build my discipline around it, make it harder
Right,
for myself.
but sometimes you have to do things to save yourself. So, I'm going to use this bag of nuts as an example. See, I have this Ziploc bag full of nuts. Well, that was the bag of nuts that I brought with me when I traveled for my keynote, because I can't eat gluten. So I always have some nuts with me so that if I'm hungry and there's nothing for me to eat, they're there. And when I was driving home yesterday from where I was, it was like a 3-hour drive. I had the bag of nuts on the seat beside me in the car. And so I'm like eating, and they're salty and they're good. And I'm eating and I'm like, oh my God, Lisa, stop eating. So I zip up the bag. And then the next thing you know, I'm back in there. Oops, sorry about that. I'm back in there and I'm grabbing more nuts and I'm grabbing more nuts. And then at one point I was like, all right, you cannot be trusted. I zipped the bag and I threw it someplace in the car. So I couldn't reach it. Yep. So I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think whatever the thing is that you have to do to make it easier for you to not do the thing that is habitual. It's habitual. Just grab another nut. They're salty. They're good. It's habitual to look at your phone as soon as you see the light come on. If I have a little phone stand, and if I just turn my phone the other way so I can't see it, then I'm not distracted by it. It's like notifications on my computer. I don't have notifications to come zinging across my computer because my eyes would be like, and I wouldn't be present with people.
It's true. It's magic how much easier focused behaviors become when you stop the things you have the power to control. And how quickly you realize that as much as it feels like you're needed all the time right now by everyone, that when you actually mute it all and come back a few hours later, it's very rare that there was something that was truly, truly that urgent and they didn't call you.
Yeah. I went away for my husband's birthday a couple of weeks ago for the weekend. And Michelle, my executive assistant, changed the password on my email Friday night so that I couldn't access email until Monday morning. And she promised me that she would check email 3 times a day while I was away. And if there was anything really urgent that couldn't wait until Monday, she would text me and let me know. I didn't hear from her once.
How did that feel?
It felt great. I'd like her to do it every weekend.
Yeah.
Actually, she's going to do it again this weekend because we're away this weekend.
I love that. I have to give that a go. That sounds amazing. Speaking of your husband, my husband would be remiss if I didn't ask you to talk about the hurt feelings report.
Oh, yeah. Paul has this joke: when somebody's feelings are hurt, file a hurt feelings report. And, it's a nice way to lighten the conversation when somebody's taking things personally. And I think that's one of the things that I love the most about him is he's able to use humor in so many different ways to lighten things that often feel heavier and more serious than they need to be. And so it's just kind of a saying that we have. And it's a jokey thing, right? I mean, we've told Nabil before to file a hurt feelings report, but it's funny. Like when you hear it that way, you're like, you're right. I'm upset about this. My feelings are hurt, right? It's really not a big deal. I'm just being a big baby. And the hurt feelings report goes to like a miscellaneous inbox that nobody checks.
Yeah, I think it's part of that self-reflection, right? That in a lot of instances when, at least me, when I'm upset, when I actually take a step back to think about what I'm upset about, in a lot of cases, it's not even close to as major as it feels in that moment. And sometimes it is. You deal with
ego,
right? Yeah.
Where's ego?
Yes. Yeah. So on the topic of egos, I would say of all of the sayings that you've said to me that I have repeated time and time and time and time again, it's that telling the truth is not bragging. I've said it, I mean, almost exclusively to women, And a lot of very successful women that don't talk about their successes, that or that minimize them. And whenever I share that, all of a sudden people open up and they start talking about the things they've accomplished. Where did you first hear that? How did you start sharing that?
I think Alan might have said it to me, Alan Weiss, at one point. If it's the truth, it's not bragging. And I think there's another expression that, and I forget where I heard of it, like, you need to see something to know that it's possible for you. If you can't see it, you don't necessarily know it's possible for you. So I think that, this sun is driving me crazy. Give me 1 second.
I keep moving on my side for anyone watching the video because as if it's going to make a difference.
I don't even know if that makes it better.
It's what happens when you have 8 calls in a day. The sun changes. Other one. Yeah.
It's not even any better. Hang on. A little bit. A little bit better.
Just little spots now instead of big ones.
Okay, we'll get somebody to edit that out. So I think it was Alan that first said, if it's the truth, it's not bragging. But then I heard someone else say, we need to see things to know that it's possible for us. And so I think a lot of times women have difficulties talking about financial success. They have difficulties talking about what they've built. They don't want to brag. They've been taught as little girls not to brag about things. And so we don't want to be showy offy. And whereas, guys are not necessarily like that. Guys are, pretty open about things. And so guys tend to be a bit more bold in not all, I don't want to generalize, but, traditionally men are a little bit bolder than women are. And so I think that we have to celebrate our successes and we have to let other people know what is possible for them too. And I just think it's important. I think it's important. Like, I had somebody say to me at the event that I spoke at this week, she's like, are you really a high school dropout? And I was like, yeah. And she's like, tell me what happened. And so I told her, she's like, oh my God, you're going to make me cry. And I was like, saying I'm a high school dropout isn't necessarily bragging, but it kind of is, because it's like, and I'm a high school dropout and look what I've done with my life and my business. Pretty impressive. So I think it's just important for us to be honest about who we are. And I think context matters, right? Sharing in the right context. If I walk into a restaurant and I sit down with strangers and I say, hey, I just closed a 6-figure sale. That's kind of
That's not how you do it.
No, that's kind of braggalicious, right? I think that it context matters, right? Where you're sharing the information, who you're sharing the information with, and why you're sharing the information matters.
Yeah, I definitely identify with that, particularly once you see it, it's easy to believe that you can do it. I remember the first time that you told me that you didn't have a mortgage on the house that you were in at the time. And I didn't understand because you're not old. I thought only old people, like grandparents, great grandparents, they don't have mortgages, right? Because it's been 35 years. I thought that's the only way you could either have no mortgage or you don't have a house at all. So no mortgage. And you told us about that. You told us how you did it and some of the lessons you'd learned and things you would do differently. And we asked tons and tons and tons of questions. And within probably 2 years, we bought this house with no mortgage. And it wasn't even on the radar of possibilities
Mhm.
for me before that moment. And, my family does well, but they bought bigger and bigger houses every time we moved. And so, um, it just wasn't something
It's
I knew
not
about that
normal.
model. No, it's
It's not
not.
normal. It's not normal. Most people don't pay off their mortgage. But like you, I had a model. So my husband used to work for the gas company, and there was a guy that he worked with, and him and his wife were trying to pay off their mortgage by the age of 40. And I was like, people do that? That's a thing. I want to do that. And so it became a thing that I wanted to do. And by 41, we were mortgage free. And we were mortgage free on more than one property. But it's back to what I said. You have to see what is possible. Sometimes we have to see what other people have done in order to know what's possible for us.
So how do we put
And you did
ourselves?
it in your 20s, for God's sake.
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty wild.
Hmm.
Hopefully I was in my late 20s. So hopefully there's an early 20s person who's listening to this and they can do it even faster and earlier than
Yeah.
we is. I think that's part of the beauty of learning things from others is that it cascades down further. And a
Mhm.
saying I love is that everyone should have three types of mentors: someone who is 20 years older, someone who is 20 years younger, and someone who's 20 steps ahead.
Mm.
And I love that because it really encompasses the value of the entire span of people. Doesn't minimize that younger person, which of course I selfishly like, but it also establishes how much value people at different spaces and stages really can bring to you.
Mhm. I love that. Can we double back to the mortgage thing for a second? Because, as you're sitting in your beautiful home and I'm sitting in my beautiful home, I think there's something that I want our listeners to hear. And if you're watching this video, you might, if you're watching the video, you see where we are. But we both made choices to live in fixer uppers and construction zone hell for a significant period of time to be able to accomplish what we accomplished. And so a lot of people aren't willing to do that. And so sometimes you have to do things that are uncomfortable in order to have what you most want. It's not that we just were like, oh, lucky and paid off our mortgage. We flipped houses and did work to get there. So I just wanted to add that in so that there's a bit more context.
That's a great context. I agree. I mean, that fireplace, for those watching, that was the only heating source in this entire house when we bought it. It was not meant to be lived in the winter. And right. We knew that going in. So we knew the type of, well, we thought we knew, ended up being even more labor than we thought, but it was part of the intentional decision where we sold our perfectly lovely, fairly new, wonderful townhouse in the city and moved more into the country in something that required a lot of work. And now the work is done and there's mortgage. But I think a lot of things, I mean, let's be honest, most things that people want in life, it requires hard work and it's not really that fun. It's not really that glamorous. Oh, what advice would you give to someone who wants to get better at, let's say, selling?
Learn how to sell. So I don't mean that to be like a smartass. I just mean selling is a skill. So if you want to get better at selling, then you need to learn how to sell because there is a process that you go through in order to be able to sell to people. And you need to understand where you have a skill deficit so you can strengthen that skill. And a lot of people who end up being entrepreneurs have never had a background in sales. And if they've never had a background in sales, they don't know how to uncover needs. They don't know how to overcome objections. They don't know how to present options. They don't know how to write a proposal. They don't know how to ask for the sale. And so when you start to break apart the pieces that go into selling and recognize that there are skills associated with doing all of those things, then you see it's not actually so hard, but it's something you need to learn how to do if you want to be able to do it better, right? It's like, I don't really know how to swim. I'm okay in the water. I took swimming lessons in my 40s and there's some stuff I can do, but I am not a strong swimmer. And part of the reason that I'm not a strong swimmer is because we moved from Ottawa in 2014 and I stopped taking regular swimming lessons. And so if I want to become a really competent, strong swimmer, I will go back to taking lessons because swimming is a skill. And the only way that I'm going to learn how to swim better is to get my ass in the water. Well, the only way you're going to learn how to sell better is to practice the skill of selling and have somebody who knows how to do it teach you what you need to do so that you can learn.
Fair. What about, I love plants, right? And there's certain tasks that when you have as many as I do, there's things that have to be done every single day. And maybe I can push it a day, maybe two, but leaves are going to start dying if I don't, right? There's certain habits that if I want to have the best results, I have to follow.
Mm-hmm.
What types of habits would you say someone should build if they want to get better at selling or growing their business?
I think they need to get better at the habit of marketing, because marketing is what drives traffic, and traffic is what drives sales opportunities. So it doesn't matter if you have a retail store or if you have an online business, you're still trying to turn browsers into buyers. And so, if you don't do any marketing, you can't get traffic. So I think that's one habit, is consistent marketing. The second habit is really carefully looking at your numbers to understand what's going on in your business, because there are a lot of people out there that brag about having $1 million businesses, but they can't afford to pay themselves. And so that don't impress me much. I've said that before. If you have $1 million business and you can't pay yourself at least a 6-figure salary, something is going on and it's wrong. So you need to be able to diagnose what's going on in the makeup of your sales to ensure that the sales that you are making are actually sales that wear well. And when I say a sale that wears well, what I mean is that it's a win for the customer, it's a win for the business, and it's a win for you because the sale was profitable. And so I think the habit of really understanding the numbers and understanding your sales numbers and your profitability of your business is also really important. The third thing that I think is important is communication and listening skills. Selling isn't telling. And a lot of people just want to tell you, hey, I can sell you a website. Hey, I got you this thing. They want to ram it down your throat. And that's not how you sell. Selling is carefully listening to what a buyer's needs are and helping them make a buying decision. So you've got to get really good at asking questions and then shutting up and listening and paraphrasing back to people to let them know what you've heard. Too many people in a sales process do all of the talking instead of asking questions and listening very carefully in order to be able to present the right solution to their buyer.
One of the tactics that I found very effective that you taught was the which close.
Mm-hmm.
You talk about two options and which one do you prefer, A or B?
Yeah.
And silence. And both are good options, right? There's no trick to it. It's simply finding out which one they'd prefer. But it was so scary the first time I did it, and really scary the second time, still a bit scary the third time. And now it's total habit. It's pretty much the only way I do it.
Mm-hmm. I learned that in retail.
I love it.
Somebody wants black dress pants, you always bring them back 2 pairs and say, which do you prefer?
I love it. And it's amazing how much correlation there is between the online selling and the in-person selling.
Mm-hmm.
Another thing that I learned from you early on, I think it was in the sales pilot. There was a challenge in there and it said, next time you're standing in line at the grocery store or something like that, turn to the person beside you in line and talk to them. And, coming from the we don't call people on the phone generation that I'm in, that just sounded absurd. Like, what am I going to say to this stranger? And I was ruminating on that fact when I was in the elevator, and then this man walked in the elevator and I breathed in deeply and I went, well, it's not a grocery store line, but here we go. And he ended up taking Nabil and I out for dinner. He was the CEO of a huge company, and he thought it was so cool that I was brave enough to strike up a conversation with a stranger. And the second time it happened, it was someone when we were waiting for a plane. And when we got there, they asked, invited us to go for drinks with them on their boat later that week. it was wild. People who I never would have even looked at directly in the eye. We were building these relationships off these one-off conversations.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any other ideas like that of things people can do to build their confidence, really, for lack of a better description?
Well, I think, talking to strangers in the elevator at the grocery store is a good way. Another thing is going to an event and meeting people at an event. And when you walk into an event room, look at, finding people that you can connect with. Now, when you walk into an event and there's a whole bunch of people there, it can feel really intimidating and overwhelming. Look for somebody else who feels intimidated and overwhelmed and be the friendly face.
Oh, I
Be
love that.
friendly. Go say hi to somebody. I think those are all really important things to do when it comes to selling. I think, we're all afraid of different things. And so if you figure out what you're afraid of, and I mean, you said it best, right? What we're really most afraid of is embarrassing ourselves. So if you figure out what the things are that you're most afraid of doing because you're afraid of embarrassing yourself, run to those things and do it. Get over your fear of embarrassment.
Oh, so much easier said than done. And yet, once you start doing it, it's wildly addictive to be able to overcome those scary things and be on the other side. And something you say to me regularly when something new that's scary comes up in business or life for me, you say, Michelle, you're someone who does hard things. You've done this and this and this and this. And you rattle them off faster than I could do it for myself. I love that about you. It's like you're my cheerleader. You're also my football coach. I mean, it all ties back to the beginning that you're very good at knowing what people need and being able to deliver the message in that format. It's very impressive.
Thank you. I think that, what you've described is an important thing. This series that we're recording for is the advisor series. And I think that we all need advisors in life that are going to tell us the truth, that are going to stretch us and are going to help us to grow into the places that we need to grow into, whether it's a business advisor, whether it's a CPA, whether it's a tax advisor. We need people that know things and see things and can do things that are outside of our comfort zone that can help us to step into the zone of comfort with them.
I love it. They take you along the path. All you've got to do is keep putting one foot in front of another and trusting them, and you're going to end up in the right spot.
Right. And I mean, I think that if people would actually spend a little bit more time looking at other people's success and figuring out how they got there. I mean, if you look at your business has grown by 15 times since we started working together. That's a 15x growth, which is, astronomical. What did you do? Like, people should pay attention to the success of others and look at what they did that they're not willing to do to get the results that the person that they admire has achieved.
I love that. It's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, for anyone listening, the answer is I did exactly what Lisa told me to do. And again and again.
Even when it was scary.
Oh, especially when it was scary. So. All right. Well, on that note, I want to end with the first thing I ever heard you say at an event. So this is before we even worked together privately, several years before. And it's a saying that I really think embodies you as a whole. And it's that all ships rise with the tide. And I hope for those of you that are listening today that you were able to get lots of benefit out of this and that your ships can rise as well.
Thank you, Michelle. This was great.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.